the stormy night. This all happened when I was very young, maybe in second or third grade. Most memories from that age are blurry, but this one stands out crystal clear. It was a regular school day, and it had been pouring rain since morning. By the time I got home, the storm had grown worse. That evening, my parents left me at home and went to an event. I can't remember exactly what it was, a fundraiser, a dinner, something formal. But they planned to return later that night. But as night fell, the storm turned violent. The rain hammered the streets, and the winds made driving dangerous. My parents called, apologizing over and over. They told me they couldn't risk the drive home and would spend the night at a friend's house closer to the venue. My mom gave me a strict list of instructions. Lock every door and window. Close all the blinds. Keep at least one light on. At that age, I didn't understand why she made such a big deal out of it. Honestly, I was excited to be home alone. It meant candy with no limits and no bedtime rules. I stayed downstairs in the living room, glued to the TV. At some point, sugar and exhaustion caught up with me, and I dozed off on the couch. When I woke up hours later, the house felt freezing. Not just cooler, the kind of cold that creeps under your skin. That's when I remembered my mom's instructions. I dragged myself up and checked everything. The doors were locked, the blinds were closed, the windows were sealed tight. Everything looked perfectly normal. Still, the icy air didn't make sense. I told myself maybe the storm had knocked out the heater, and that explanation was enough to push away the unease. Tired, I headed upstairs to my room. That's when I realized just how violent the storm really was. My room had a large window, and the rain slammed against it with a furious rhythm. Every flash of lightning was followed by thunder so loud it rattled the glass. I wasn't scared of storms, but that night felt different. I couldn't sleep. I tossed, turned, and then I heard it. A strange creaking sound. At first, I thought it was the storm playing tricks, maybe a tree shifting outside. But no, it sounded like wooden boards moving under weight. The problem? My room was fully carpeted. There was no way the sound came from inside. I sat up, straining my ears. Lightning lit the room for a split second, and everything looked normal until my eyes fell on the closet. The door was open, not wide, just slightly ajar, but I was certain I had closed it. Something or someone had opened it. My chest tightened. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe too loudly. I just slipped out of bed, moving as quietly as I could, and made my way to the door. Every step felt like walking through quicksand. Somehow I reached the hallway, rushed downstairs, and crawled under the dining room table. That's when the fear finally broke me. I started crying, because I knew, without a doubt, there was someone inside my room. I don't know how long I stayed under that table. Minutes felt like hours. My heart pounded so hard I was sure whoever was upstairs could hear it. Then the sound came. Footsteps, slow at first, then uneven, not like normal walking. It sounded as if whoever it was jumping or stumbling down the stairs, each step scraping and thudding against the wood. They were coming closer. I pressed myself flat against the floor, squeezing under the table as far as I could, biting down on my sleeve to keep from sobbing. Through the thin gap between the tablecloth and the floor, I saw them. 2 bare feet appeared, muddy, wet. Their skin had a sickly yellow tint, covered in scratches and small cuts like they'd crawled through thorns. The ankles wobbled as though they could barely stand upright. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. I didn't want to know. Then something fell. Clang! A metal wrench hit the floor inches from me. If they bent down to pick it up, they would see me. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I couldn't move. I just stared at that wrench, praying they wouldn't crouch. They didn't. They stood there for what felt like forever, just standing, breathing, dripping water onto the tile, and then finally they moved. Those sickly legs stumbled away from the table. I heard the uneven steps wander through the first floor, the living room, the hallway, maybe even the kitchen. Then the front door opened and shut. Silence. But I didn't come out right away. I stayed curled under that table long after they were gone. Part of it was fear, but part of it was numbness, like my mind had shut down completely. When I finally did crawl out, my whole body was shaking. The wrench was still lying on the floor. I picked it up. I don't know why. Maybe because it felt like proof. Maybe because I didn't want my parents to find it and ask questions I couldn't answer. With trembling hands, I locked the front door again and crept upstairs to my room. I shut the door, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally dragged me under. When I woke up the next morning, the house was bright, warm, and quiet, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had been in my house that night, and for years after, I would never forget it. That night changed me. Even as a kid, I understood how serious it was. I stopped sleeping through storms. I started double-checking every lock in the house before bed. But the strangest part wasn't what happened that night. It was what came after. A few months later, the dreams began. They weren't normal dreams. They felt half real, like I was floating outside of my own body. In them, I'd see my bedroom from the ceiling, as though I were watching myself through a security camera. I couldn't move, only turn my head. At first, the room looked normal, but then I'd start noticing little details. My digital clock counting backward instead of forward. Crayon drawings taped to my dresser of people holding hands in front of a blue-roofed house, drawings I never remembered making. A lost toy train of mine sitting in a different spot on the carpet each time. Every dream was the same. After a while, I'd feel an urge to look at my bedroom window. And that's when he'd appear. A man, gray hair, a faint scar across his temple, standing just inches from the glass, staring in at me. He'd claw at the window as though trying to open it, scratching and pulling like an animal. That was when I'd wake up. Sometimes I bolted upright, too scared to move. Sometimes I ran straight to the window, expecting to see marks. There was never anything there. I had this dream every few months for almost a year. By the fourth time, I told my parents. They said it was normal, just a recurring nightmare. My dad even reminded me that they were always one room away if I felt scared. But even at that age, I knew it was more than just a dream. Then, after the fourth dream, they stopped. For 6 months, nothing happened. I let myself believe it was over. Until one random night, I had the dream again. The same backward clock, the same drawings, the same toy train. But this time, something was different. Something that made my stomach drop. My window was open. As soon as I saw that, I woke up, except I couldn't move. Complete sleep paralysis. My brain screamed at me to get up, to check the window, but my body wouldn't respond. I lay there frozen, feeling a cold breeze against my skin, convinced that the man was right there, climbing inside. Those 5 minutes of paralysis were the longest of my life. When I finally regained control, I bolted to the window. It was locked, shut tight. But I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the dream itself or the thought that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a dream at all. The truth behind the walls. By the time I turned 16, the dreams had stopped. I almost convinced myself they were just a phase, my childhood imagination blending fear and memory. But then one night during dinner, the subject came back up. We were sitting around the table when my dad casually mentioned the old hospital again. He had driven past it on his way home, and he said something strange, something that made my fork freeze in midair. They finally tore it down, he muttered. Good riddance. Nothing should have been left standing after what happened there. I asked him what he meant. At first, both of my parents tried to brush it off. They said it wasn't important, that the place had been closed for years. But I pushed. I told them about the dreams, the man at the window, the backward clocks, the open window. Their faces went pale. Finally, my mom spoke. She told me the hospital had been shut down in the late 1980s after a series of gruesome incidents. A doctor who worked there went mad. They said he performed experiments in the basement, locking patients away, keeping them alive for reasons no one could explain. Most of the bodies were never found. And then she said the words that made my blood run cold. He was never caught. The stories claimed the doctor lived nearby, hiding in plain sight, watching families, choosing houses at random to stalk. Some swore he would stand outside windows at night, waiting for the right moment to slip inside. I laughed nervously, hoping it was just a local legend. But then my mom looked me straight in the eyes and said, "That's why we never told you. The night you said you saw someone outside your window, we believed you." I felt the room spin. I asked them why they didn't call the police, why they didn't move. My dad sighed and said they did call the police once, But the tracks in the snow led nowhere. No one could find proof. For years I tried to bury that memory. I left for college, moved far away, and avoided even thinking about hospitals or that stormy night. But sometimes, you can't escape the past. Because just last year, I was staying in a new apartment across town. I woke up one night to that same feeling, that same cold dread I hadn't felt in a decade. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window, and there he was. The same man, the scar across his temple, the gray hair, staring at me with that patient, unnatural stillness. Except this time, he smiled. And for the first time, I realized something I had never considered before. Maybe he was never part of the hospital at all. Maybe he had always been looking for me. That's the full ending.